Hey, Composing Gloves here. I'm wearing a hat. Today we're going to be talking about Common Time. You are familiar with Common Time. Common Time sounds a little bit like this intro drum loop. So now we're at the point now where we can start looking at meters and rhythms, and you should have more or less an idea of how to talk about what meters are doing and why they're doing it. So we can begin to move on to more important things. So let's talk about, first off, let's talk about this thing called common time. Now, I've read a couple of things that were sort of interesting. I don't know how true they are because the sources I found them in were sort of weird. But one said that 3/4 time, 3 used to represent the Trinity, or it was used and idealized as the Trinity and was reminiscent of a circle, that the 3 represented the perfect circle. And so 4/4 times actually pretty astounding when I guess it came around, because it was like writing with part of a circle. It wasn't as perfect, but it's obviously right now it's definitely the most popular meter these days. It totally trashes any other meter as far as number of songs written in it. And there's its close cousin 2/4, which we'll explore another day. But this is a very, very common. The reason why this song is so 4/4 is because I emphasize 1 as the most important. So 1 is doont, but then you hear the clap emphasizing 3, which isn't quite as important, but very important than 1. Now, of course, we know that 1 is usually the most important, and the other 3 are just simply less important, and they serve the purpose of de-emphasizing 1. So we have 1, and then a couple beats go by that are not as important, so they're not as loud, they're maybe not as much timbral things are going on, whatever it is, and then we reach 1 again where the moment of excitement happens, and then we go back to our day and we form this rhythm that we are able to connect with. We're able to detect a pulse. And so in 3 and 4/4, there's this other one though. So that's like old way of looking at it. The newer way of looking at it is this beat 3 is exciting, but not quite as exciting. And so we get exciting. We get exciting, less and less exciting, and then we get exciting, less exciting, like substantially less exciting usually. And then we have, this is slightly more exciting, but then we're like let down, we're like, not as exciting, and then bang, we're back to very exciting again. So this drum loop follows that. And as we move in through further and further. Now this was a mixed down project, so it's not it's not super crazy loud, which is, by the way, I think a great thing. You just turn up your volume and it sounds really cool. But for now, my voice is kind of loud, so you probably won't be able to do that in this tutorial. But I have this here, and you'll see here that this first beat. So this one is a slightly less 4/4 example, and we could get really complicated. You see I have the same drum loop, but we have this now. So we have where are our emphases here? Now, I'm not going to get into the sound design, but you can essentially look at this automation clip as sort of some ways of writing really specific rhythms. And we see that we are also working on a grid with this thing. So we see that we have a big hit, and now there's quite a bit of syncopation going on here. We're going to be covering that pretty soon. But you see here that this beat 4 receives an unusual emphasis. And so this is actually less common time than you would think. Even though it's still technically 4 to the floor, the fact that we give beat 4 so much emphasis away from it, we establish a regular pulse, and it's still considered a form of 4/4, a form of common time. But that classical meter disappears, so to speak, here. Whereas over here, it was emphasized. And so we create this sense of interest in shifting the role of what one beat does over another beat over here. And so that's often what happens in drops, is this role may be challenged. That was maybe a fundamental aspect of the riser. And now, of course, I'm saying stuff. This track, by the way, is called Jumpsuit. It's on Spotify and other places, so you can look it up, Jumpsuit. And it's just a nice track. But that's basically what I wanted to say about that. So I've changed the rhythm here. Still common time, but not quite the same common time as before. So what's interesting is there's all sorts of studies about us extracting meter, and we'll pull out a meter and clap it. And sometimes we'll clap it too fast, we'll clap it at double time when in reality it was happening at halftime, or we'll clap it at halftime when in reality it was happening at double time. So, or twice as fast. And they've actually made machines that try and do this. They've actually got a foot tapping machine that will listen to music, or at least have music go into its sensors or whatever it does, and it will extract the beat. And so it's sort of interesting because it follows the same sorts of issues. Something in our comparison, in our brain, has a bit of a hard time sometimes with that principle of what's the true meter. But when we shift around cues like this, it makes it easier to also understand the tempo. But now usually it's pretty simple, especially with a piece like this. People will say, oh, there's not a lot to think about sometimes. These real highfalutin people who are usually used to trying to listen to pretty extravagant things with a lot of things going on. But anyways, my point is that this just helps the listener, maintains interest and balance. And it happens all the time in 4/4. It's a tool that you have. So that's just like the basic structure, and you can manipulate it. If we come over here, I do another thing with a drum loop. I believe it's in this section right here. So let's just pull out. So we see we have several rhythms going on, and they sort of work together doing interesting things. Now the first one we have is this just drum loop. So it's just it's simple time. It's pretty easy. We're doing basic syncopations. It even shown lined up right on the grid. Not that crazy. But then I have this going on against that simple syncopation, or that simple meter thing. All right, let me. Where's the automation? Oh, it's probably down here. There it is. So we have that going on. You see, I've also got I've got another synth going on, lending itself to different effects to give, again, I've still maintained that beat 4 as being sort of a different thing. It's sort of a theme in this one. But here I've got this sort of unusual thing. And now you notice I am not emphasizing any sort of like, not one note is any more important than another. I'm relying on tonal aspects and different sections in the drum loop to help emphasize those changes. So I don't want to I'm not looking to compound this. Now I could probably make it sound a little more dynamic if I do that. So when I was writing this, that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for just it to sound just like this, a very even sound. That's why things like compression can alter the feel of a track so drastically if you compress it pretty hard. So anyways, we have this and it's going, we see that 1 receives a natural emphasis and 3 does, but then we get this unusual 4, or not 1, this is all 1 beat. So we see that 1, but okay, take that back. 1 does, 3 does. This is not 3 though. This is 3. And so that's fine. And we even, I believe, have a chord change right there, or we're sounding out as second. So it's not a chord change, it's a passing tone. But technically, I guess we would consider this, because it's happening on 4 beats, a sus chord, because it's just an arpeggiated sus chord. Because A, E, C, or it's an add chord. It's an add 2 chord since we're adding the second, not a sus chord. So anyways, that's like MIDI music theory if you're interested in that sort of mumbo jumbo on the notes themselves. But you see, I'm emphasizing the same beats, but I give these like little middle notes to maintain interest. This pulls away the emphasis from what was originally receiving the emphasis. It's a type of syncopation. And so even though we have this going on, we can sort of groove with this thing. And then to compound its effect, over here, I add in a drum loop, or not another drum loop. I add in something. So I add in this guy here. And he's moving against these guys. So we have this 4/4 that's being mangled around. So over here, it's getting mangled around pretty hardcore. But then we give the listener something really anchored, but we still have this going on in the background. So it's sort of like we're slowly introducing higher levels of complexity as we go. So if I were to start it from like right here. So you see, forms a nice groove section. Things are going, and because of our timbre changes with that snare, because you can hear the snare. And so we're like, whoa, that's sort of like off place, but I know where the jam is. But then I have this sort of thing that's also reinforcing the beat, but it's like doing things that are like off the beat in sort of weird spots. This one is probably the weirdest one. This one is not quite as extreme, and this one lands right on it. But then they're also stylistically different, because this is shorter than this is. And so those are like do-do. So that's like a very different feel than this do over here. So it's like da-da-da, da-da-da, So there's like a da versus do. And if you ever are in a band, your instructor or whoever it is, maybe you're in a more legit band, your what is that, conductor, may be very, very particular. I've seen conductors get really crazy on percussionists on like the way they play. And usually if you're in like a college level, if you're in like the high band, they'll be really particular with the way the winds go. But in lower levels, depending on the level of the player, they might let it go because the player might not be good enough yet to be able to do that super specific thing that the conductor wants. So it just depends. If you get now, I've been in somewhere the composer's there, and the composers are usually a little less. They do not care sometimes. They're just like, you freaking play it the way I want it to be played, or screw you, get out of here. Sometimes they can be quite mean. Actually, I've never dealt with mean composers like that mean. But I have had them where they realize the player can't do exactly what they wanted in their composition, and that's always an interesting experience, seeing how they cope with that. But yeah, that's one reason why I like the land of computer working. If you have any questions about this, let me know. That's just a couple of things about common time, common meter that people, maybe you don't take the time to analyze things like this, but it's kind of helpful to know. That way, next time you're writing, you can be like, oh yeah, I'm going to emphasize the beat and do this and add this. A lot of times people are just jamming and grooving and they just use their senses, which is great. But when you want to, get down and be creative and experiment, it's really helpful to have some guidance and direction on some principles that you can either choose to just completely ignore and make something like really unusual, or the ones that you can use to enhance and make something that's more stereotypical, but like with guidance and direction would be on average more interesting than something that's just like super boring and bland. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.